I hope everyone's having a good Twin City month. And this is just the first week of it. So it's always startup year. Great time to do a startup. Well, we'll get started, and with time, hopefully, more people will roll in. But let's kick this off. So, get some quick things out of the way. Usually, this is an interactive talk. I'm going to try to keep it as interactive as I can, trying to use the chat. I really don't want this to be a lecture. It's not me coming down from mountains with 2 tablets trying to tell you what I learned. It's just kind of talking about how I've done teams, worked with teams, built teams, and what I've learned. So please ask questions. If you're shy, you can send it to me in email, and I can reply to them in email. I also save time at the end to ask questions. Also, feel free to ask them during the presentation. It's also going to be hard for me. You can always see me wave my hands. I usually walk around, so it's going to be hard to sit here, but I will do my best. And always call your mom. She misses you. On that note, you're probably wondering, who's this Chip guy? Well, I'm from the range. I'm from Minnesota, born in Duluth. Ended up moving around a lot. Been in the tech industry over 30 years, 21 years in video games. So I guess I'm legal now to make video games. My big break was when I started at Apple, way back when it used to be called Apple Computers. And actually 1988. So yes, I'm old. So from there, Apple, Anderson Consulting, Advanced Technology Group, Microsoft Game Studio when it was less than 50 people. Worked on the first Xbox. Went to Activision Blizzard, did a number of game studios, but now I'm excited to be working for Modern Logic, which is a local development studio. I've shipped over 100 software projects. I managed teams as small as 2, as big as 100. I've done them locally. I've done them virtually. I've done them through different time zones in different countries. And I think my record is at least 10 teams at once over 5 different time zones. So I've had experience working with multiple different types of teams, and this is kind of what I've learned. And when I built my own first startup, my own first game studio, some of the things that I went through, some of the things my friends went through, and I tried to gather all this information in to help you create your own team. So to give you a little background, and just some of you may be going through this, how many people currently work at a big organization, like a Target or whatever? You can just hit yes and type it in the keyboard, so I can try to see if you're working at a large organization and you want to kind of do your own startup. Either we're shy or no one works at a big organization. That's cool too. How many people work at a small organization? Startups, yes. Okay. All right. So just to give you some of the growing pains that I went through. As I said, I started at Microsoft Game Studio. I worked on the first Xbox hockey game, and my team was 60 people, and the code name was Cujo. And every year we get together, and when we ship, we have Cujo for life as our hashtag. But I had a team of 60 people working at Microsoft. I also have, marketing. I have no idea. We probably had about 20 marketing people. There's probably hundreds and hundreds of lawyers at Microsoft. Actually had to have lawyers sit in my office and review the hockey game, which was pretty funny. A localization team, a user testing team, so very big team. Then I moved back to Minneapolis to work for Activision Minneapolis, which became Activision Minneapolis Blizzard. The whole studio was 60 people. Marketing was one person, Steve. And Steve sat next to me. And so it was kind of weird for me to go, had all this huge marketing people. Now Steve had to do everything. And then Joe was our lawyer, and Joe had to do everything. So communication styles really changed. Timelines changed. Size of teams changed. So you have to understand that when you're doing a startup, a lot of times you're going to be wearing many hats. I had my own studio, Outdoor Partners, had 3 full-time people, and we outsourced everything, testing, certain development. And so, and then I worked at a local game studio called Concrete, and they had about 27 people all in one group, 27 engineers, artists, QA, designers, everyone. So I've had a mix. I've gone through the gambit of working with different team sizes. And I just kind of important for you to understand where I've been. So I always like to start out what this talk is not about. So I'm not going to talk about funding. I'm not going to talk about where to get people or how to get projects, or work with back-end server stuff, or who's going to get my coffee. At this event, I'm sure there's tons of great presentations about this, where to find these people, get it from them. Probably the biggest lesson I learned is, get your own coffee. Small story on that. When I started at Apple, they were hiring IBM people to come in to work at Apple. And they don't have secretaries there. They have group assistants or team group managers, and the IBM people always used to go, "Would you go get me my coffee?" And these people would just kind of say, "Get your own coffee. This is Apple." But what this talk is about is building, managing, and growing a successful team. And that could be your startup that you're talking about today. Could be in the group you're with right now. Maybe you're at a startup and you're part of a group. All these things can help you. And the biggest thing really is team communication. How are you communicating with your team internally? And also you should think about how you're communicating externally to your partners, the people you're working with. So I want everyone now, put your thinking caps on and ask yourself these questions. At this moment, do you have enough people? And you may not at this time. You may still just have this great idea in your head and you're just thinking about it. But you have to think about, do I have people? Do I have the right people? If not, how do I get the right people? Who's in charge? And this is something really important that I've seen in startups, is there could be a person in charge of the startup. There could be a person in charge of the actual making of whatever that product is. It could be a technical product. It could be a program, different things. Different people wear those hats. And a lot of times, myself personally, I've had to wear all these hats. So when you're wearing these hats, you have to think about it. How are you going to communicate? How are you going to work with these people? So think about who's in charge of these different things. And it may be you. And then big thing is, how are you going to communicate with all these people? Or even if it's just with yourself. This one's kind of funny, but where are you going to be located in this world we live in now of COVID? But we'll come out of this, and let's talk a little bit about location. So first question, do you have enough people? That's always a difficult question, because you don't really know. If you're still getting in that idea phases, how do you move? How do you start getting people? And it kind of depends on the project that you're creating and how is it funded. So if you already have money and it's funded, you'll be able to create a budget, and you can be able to create a budget and figure out, okay, let's just pretend this is a technical project, because some of you may not have a technical project. And so I want to build an app. Let's just say I'm going to build an app. Can I build that app myself? No, I need an engineer to help me. So I need to start pricing how much an engineer is going to cost, or a number of engineers, or am I going to hire them full time? Am I going to hire them on a contract? Am I going to outsource it to a company? So it all depends on your money. So you want to look at your budget and see how much money you have, and that's going to be one step of helping you find out. If you're bootstrapping it yourself, it's coming out of your own pocket, that's going to be a lot different. You're going to look at yourself, maybe you could do it. You're going to maybe ask some people to put some sweat equity into this. And so those are things you need to think about when you're thinking about people working on the project. And we're going to talk more about that. But the big one, it's also very dependent on the next question, which is, do you have the right people? And that is probably the most important thing. Every person should have a specific role in your startup. Because when you are doing your startup, you're small, you got to be nimble. So it's not like, okay, I want to create a band, and I'm going to have a band in the garage, and it's like, okay, I'll play tambourine. Okay, that's cool. You can play tambourine. It's going to be fun. Startup, maybe not, because you want everybody who's working on the startup to have a specific role. They're doing something. They're helping you move your dream, your vision of your startup forward. So make sure everyone has a specific role. One way to do that is escape pod or lifeboat drill. Can people put yes in there if you've heard of lifeboat drills? Because I've done this presentation before and people have not understood what a lifeboat drill is. If you don't know what it is, put N. If you do know what it is, put yes in the chat. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, we got one no, so I'll explain. So, unfortunately, I've worked at companies and being a manager, and you may have to do layoffs. And so they say do a lifeboat drill, and the lifeboat drill is who would you keep? Who would you keep to go this going, or to keep this project going forward? I'll put it in even simpler terms with a real life story. Is think about it this way: if you are in a lifeboat and your mother and your significant other is in the water and you only can fit one other person in the lifeboat, who would you put in? It's that important. In my case, I put my wife. But I gave this speech in Russia, and afterwards a gentleman from Russia came over to me and said, Chip, that question is not good in Russia. And I said, why? And he goes, Chip, in Russia, you only have one mother. You can get many wives. You put your mother in the boat. So that was an interesting thing I learned using this thing. So you want to think about it that way. It's that important. Who are the most important people that you want to have? I also suggesting don't hire your buddy, your best friend, the family member. There's an asterisk there, unless they can do the job, unless they're rock stars, unless they're a great performer. I've had a friend, that put a family member on the project. They were just okay. They end up having to fire them. It just caused problems. So that's, once again, it goes back to making sure you have the right people working in your startup. And everybody has to be committed. And that is really important. And it's tough at the beginning of your startup, is making sure that everyone is committed to what you're trying to do. And I've had this with startups. I've had this when I was working on projects where I had to go to people and say, are you in or are you out? And because it affects your team. When you're working on your team, if you have one person that may not be totally in, that's going to affect the other people that are maybe full in. They're full in, but then maybe they're thinking, well, this person's not putting in the hours, this person's not doing that. Maybe I can back off too. So you want to make sure your team is totally committed to what you're working on. And sometimes you have to have that tough conversation of, are you in, are you out? And it's worked very well for me where people go, you know what, Chip, something's going on in my life and I have to bow out. And that's fine. And I've had other people that were like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I'll step up my game. And they stepped up their game and worked out. You need to have that conversation. And I would say have that conversation as early as possible. So I worked with a friend who created many games for Nintendo, and I used to go visit his studio in Canada, and he had such a great culture. His people were great to work with. Everybody was friendly. And I said, what's your secret? And he said, Chip, I have a better firing policy than a hiring policy. And they say if a person is not fitting in after 2 weeks, they get rid of them because they want to protect their culture so much that they look at everybody and they make sure that everyone is on board. So that's something to think about, because with this startup, this could be a small startup. In a year, it could be 50 people, 100 people. 10 years, it could be the next Amazon. So you want to create a culture that will continue on and grow with you. So you want to protect that. And next is, how do you expand? So there's times there's old buy versus grow. You could grow. If I wanted to do that app, I could teach myself how to program, but how long is that going to take me? How many bugs am I going to have? Am I going to, blow my time and my budget just trying to get it out? So it may be better to hire a great programmer that I can work with, or outsource to a programmer, or outsource to a company that could help me create my vision because I'm not an engineer. I have it on a napkin. It's a great idea. And I could work with somebody. I'll just say Modern Logic, for example, that could help you, turn your vision into life. So you have to weigh that and look at it. So moving on, another very important thing is who's steering your ship. Sorry, everyone can't be in charge. And there's going to be situations where you need to make a call. And you, being in a startup, being in any project, it's better to make a call than not make any call at all, because you're just going to be spending time and spending money. So pick that person who's going to be in charge. I also say 50-50 partnerships are really hard. They could be 50-50 equal business partners, but somebody, needs to be calling the shots, saying what's going to be happening or which direction you're going to go into if there's a tie. So another real life example, I had 4 friends that split off, started a company. They were all equal partners. They all felt that they were in charge, and they squabbled for 6 months and blew their startup cash, and then they had to fold. And they were telling them, they did a postmortem on themselves, and they said, we really need to put somebody in charge to help us move forward. So something to think about, who's going to be in charge. I call it the whip cracker cheerleader. That's pretty much what I've done for years, is I'm, working with the team, making sure that everyone's on task, cheering, we can do this, we can do this. And if they're a little slow, cracking that whip, we need this done by Friday, we need this done by Friday. Give them a reason. We need this done, by Friday because we need to show an investor. If you give them a reason why something needs to be done, it'll be really helpful. So usually I call this is the person in charge of the project. It may not be the person in charge of the startup. It could be the person that you hired to make your project go. And that also could be an organization that you hired to help you create it. So make sure that they have a producer, project manager, someone on their end that is helping, is your person that you can talk to every single day about what's going on with your project and moving it forward. And don't kid yourself, you're going to need someone. I've known so many people where I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. And suddenly the project slips away from your vision because you're not there having that person, guide your goal through, your vision through. So it's very important to have that. And they go by many names, as I said already: producer, project manager, scrum manager. Rachel was one of my best producers I've ever had, so I like to give shout outs to her. Another important thing as you're doing a startup, I know I said wouldn't do anything about legal and stuff. One thing though, you really need to protect yourself. Have a contract with these people, because it will bite you in the butt if you do not have this. And so that means this is a clear role. They are a developer. They are an artist. They are doing this. They're doing exactly that. Also, what are their work expectations? They're going to create the code for this app. They're going to design the images for the app. They are going to test the app. What is their role? What are they doing? What is their work expectations? Also very important, are they getting money for this? Maybe in the beginning, there is no money in the startup. It's all sweat equity. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean money down the road? Does that mean stock options? You want to be very careful with that. Some people assume they have options in the company in a startup, even though they don't. So you want to be very clear up front. And percentage of the company, I've heard that, startup, I'm not going to take any salary, but I want percentage of the company. Be careful with that. Suddenly 30% of your company could be given away. So you don't want to have to go to court over this. So create a contract. And also just even credit. Some people, are they just going to get credit for their work, or do you even let them have credit for the work? Also very important is work for hire. If they're just doing this work for hire, make sure you have a contract, because they're working for hire. They're getting paid for that. That just means they have no right to any part of the company, no right to any options on that. So good way to do this is you can go to docontract.com. I use this a lot for very quickly. It's templatized. You can create a quick contract with a person, programmer, for example, artist. It can really protect you, help you out. Okay. Now this one's kind of funny in the world we live in, as I said before. Location, location, location. As you see, these are pictures from my little game studio I had, and I cry every time I see it because I had to close the door. But I would do this completely different now, and this was even before COVID. Is I thought I had to have a brick and mortar place to be a real business. I thought I had to have a storefront, for example. This is one of your second biggest expenses after people is rent, you know, paying for rent, internet to that place, everything you need is a big cost. I would start small, kitchen table, coffee shop. I know those are tough right now, but we'll get out of this. Co-working spaces are great too. I traded for space. I worked at when I had one startup, which was just me. I actually traded for space. I could work in their office, and they asked me to sit in their meetings so it made their startup look bigger. So there's ways you can trade off from that, and there's things like, BYOD, what I call bring your own desk, bring your own furniture. All the furniture you see in there in some of these pictures and rooms it came from my house. It just helped make it a little bit more uh, feel like a home and a place to work, but bring it in there. Now virtual teams, Zoom's stock is going incredible. Everyone's kind of working virtually right now. We're having a virtual conference. A couple of years ago, people thought this was crazy and thought this would never happen. This is really the way of this is changing things. People are getting more and more comfortable with virtual teams, working with them. But what I strongly suggest is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but act like you're all in the same location. Act like you actually have a working space. It just happens to be online. It's very important to make you feel like a team, to make you feel like you're on the same page, and to really help with your communication. Use instant messaging, use Slack, insert your video of choice. There's so many now. Find ones that works with you, but continuously check in a virtual team. Before, this was really hard for me to talk about it, but now it's very easy. Many people may not be going back to an office after this. So this is very positive for startup people. So communication, as I talked about before, communication I feel is very key. I believe in over communication with my people, making sure that they know everything that's going on, that's good, bad, and ugly. I use an example when I used to have external developers. I used to tell them, I'm your press agent. You need to tell me what's good, what's bad, everything. Because if I get stopped in the hallway, like for example, when I worked for Xbox, and the head of the studio goes, how is everything going with the baseball game? And I'd say, I don't know because I haven't heard from them. So then they're going to worry about, okay, is that game on track? Is Chip doing his job? Do we have problems with that developer? But if you develop this communication where you're constantly talking to each other, and then I get stopped and they're like, how's everything going with baseball? And I said, great, we just got a new build. We do have a problem with, we have a bug with the crowd, but we're getting that worked out. We have all these things in. That person's going to walk away going, oh, that project's on track. I'm going to leave it alone. So once again, communicate with your team. And this quote from George Bernard Shaw, I think is perfect because, everyone thinks that conversations took place. It might have not. It's better to say, oh, have you heard this already? If not, good. So, because usually it's like this. This is how I felt so many times with conversations. It's like, blah, 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 and you're like, what's going on? I don't understand. What am I supposed to be doing? So here, I'll put my thing on here, and I changed it to startup. The success and failure of your startup hinges on your team's communication. If you're communicating, you're all going to be moving in the right direction. If you're not, you're slowly going to start to move off. And we've seen this with projects where people are not on the same page and it moves off. And it's going to hit you in your wallet because it's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money. So you want to keep that communication flowing so you're moving in the right line. And when you get to a decision point, it's like, instead of stopping and deciding, am I going to go left or am I going to go right? You're moving and it's like, okay, we're going to take a left at this point. Off left I go. So keep that in mind. Many times we've gone to a small team and people are like, oh, it's going to be easy. It's a smaller team. It'll be easy to communicate because it's just a couple people of us. Wrong. As I said, I've been on a small team of 3 people. And if you're not communicating right, especially with only 3 people, some person, maybe your developer and your artist, they may be creating 2 different things. They got to make sure. That's really going to cause a problem if it's a small team. Got to make sure those people are on the same page. I like this one too. We worked together before. We're always going to be on the same page. Yeah, you may have worked together at Target, Adobe, wherever. Somebody else may have been setting the directions. Now your team is going to be setting directions. And just because you worked together before, and also people act a little bit different when it's, they're in charge of the startup. So you need to make sure continuing the communication. I love this one. Since it's a smaller project, it's easier to keep track of everything. That's wrong. No matter how big or small a project I worked on, you're going to have issues. You're going to have, it really doesn't matter the size of the project, how big it is. You need to communicate. And as an example I gave before, communicate more with the smaller, because you're going to have bigger turns, bigger issues. So talking about communications, big thing is great ideas come from everyone. So you may be the person with the idea, but start bouncing it off real people in your team. Use different examples, this is where I personally feel having diversity on your team of all sorts will really, really help you. I'll give you, this is a little blue, but let's see if you guys will get this one. So my mom loves to golf, and I live across the street from a golf course, not on it. I don't like golfing, but she would golf and go on the 6th hole, and she goes, I can see your house from here. And I would always say, yeah, every time I go to the bathroom, Mom, I look at the 6th hole and I think of you. And she's like, there's no way you can see the 6th hole from your bathroom. Okay. This is the difference between men and women. I know, Linda, you like golf. Men stand up sometimes when they go to the bathroom. Women don't. When I stand up, I can look out a window. So a great example of a small problem, you may be thinking one way, but when you have diversity on your team, you're going to get different viewpoints. And that's really important. So think about that. Maybe not use the example I just gave you, but think of one of your own, because great ideas come from everyone. So when I was working on the hockey game, the control scheme for our hockey game came from the artists. The artists were playing Halo, for example, and said, hey, I bet if we skate with the left stick and pass with the right stick, that's going to be more like hockey, because I could be skating forward and pass back or pass left and right. And it was a great idea. And that also helped the art team feel we're proud of this project. We're not just the artists. We're given input. We're on board. So listen to those people, and it's going to help improve your team. It's also going to help improve your product. What I like to do is start the week with an all-team meeting. I do shout outs, people that did things well, hot list. The hot list for me is what's important this week. Okay, we have to get this done this week. This has to be done by Wednesday. We have to get this out by Thursday. By Friday, we need this. If everybody knows about that on Monday and knows a priority and knows why, it's going to help get things done, or any changes in goals. And if something changes, I like to call a huddle. I'm like, okay, everybody huddle up. We just huddle up really quick and say, hey, there's been a change. What can we do? Everyone discusses it. Okay, break. All right. Check in early often. I do daily stand-ups. Also like status reports. Hold that thought. I know people are like, oh, I hate status reports. I'm going to show you a quick way to do that. If your team is starting to get bigger, or even if you just have a single partner, yes, 6 feet from each other. Individual one-on-ones are very important. Make them a priority. Do not cancel them. You're probably going to get your best information about what's going on in the startup, what's going on with the product, and what's going on with the person you're working with. So make these very high priority. I suggest you use an agile process. That could be a whole topic on its own, but what that really means is that you're building something and then you get to a certain point, maybe a sprint of 2 weeks, you'll build for 2 weeks, look at it, and then maybe adjust your plan. Build, adjust, build, adjust. Be agile. And that's, once again, comes back from feedback, getting feedback. Use collaborative software. Probably many are using that already. Google Docs, use the cloud. It's a great way to protect yourself. These are more than tools, they're your weapons on getting your project out. So one quick thing, here's status reports. Here's my trick is I always ask people, how are things going? And this is a gut feeling, meaning gut feeling. I feel this project is on track. I feel it's not. I'm getting a gut feeling from that person and how things are working. They take the tasks they completed for the week, tasks scheduled for the next week. So they're planning this week, they're planning next week. And then at the end of the week, Friday, they fill that all in. And here's where the trick comes, is the next week you just switch those around and then you have a to-done list. Not a status report. That'll help you. So it keeps track. You don't lose things that way. If you're always keeping down what you need to work on, what's scheduled next, flip it around, fill it in. I also like to have any risk dependencies, and key dates is always very important. So I know this was rapid fire. I left plenty of time for questions if you have any. So I'll open it up. I can see questions in the chat side next to you. Also, while I have you, Modern Logic is doing a promotion for Twin Cities Startup Week. You can go to the link there, and the link will explain everything about what's happening with the promotion. And if you have specific questions, you can contact Linda Cummings, and she can answer them for you. But open up to the floor. Sorry I went a little fast, but if anybody has any questions, about startups, about growing teams, whatever. Thank you, John, for putting a link in there. People can click on that. You don't have to be shy, or as I said, you can send me an email, but how much time does it take you to do a status report? Very good question. So there's two ways to do it. One is I try to either update that status report throughout the week, and then when Friday comes along, it's really easy to just boom, hit it and send. But I don't want people to be spending hours and hours and hours on the status report. It should be very easy to give a quick one. You should be able to do a status report in 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes, especially if you're tracking it in that report form I kind of gave you. Very easy to fill it in how you're doing on it. Linda's asking what's a good agenda for one-on-one tips. So I may do one-on-ones a little different. That's just the way I am and work with. First thing, I actually ask, how are you doing personally? How are things going? How are you feeling? How are things going on? Unfortunately, I found out people have had cancer. I found out people are getting divorced. I found out people broke up with their girlfriend. And that's important to me as being the manager, to understand what's going on in their life. I like to know, what their partner's name is, if they have any kids, birthdays and everything, because to me that it's a person. So I want to understand what's going on in their lives. And because that could affect work, but I'd rather have it be like, okay, we can take care of that. You need a break on that. So I usually go personal, and then I go, what's going on with the project, and let them give me an update on certain things. And then I usually end with, because maybe I call it venting. Let's say they're having a problem with a person, or they're having a problem with a project. I'll let them get all that out. And then my response to them is, do you want me to do anything about this, or do you just need the vent? And some people, most of the time, they'll go, I just needed to get off my chest chest chip. I'll take care of it. I'll speak with that person, or I'll talk to the client, or I'll handle this. Or they'll say, no, I do need your help. And so I step in. So it's usually, the person level first, then how are things going with the projects? How can I help with the projects on that? From Anders, any tips on creating, maintaining, and engaging work culture while working remotely? And for people working part-time on the team, yeah. So one of the things was, for 3 years, I was working remote for a company in the UK. And then I went to work for Modern Logic, and I was all excited because I was going back into an office setting. I was there 6 days, and then we went remote. And so luckily, I had a little bit of experience with it. So one of the things that I suggested is, let's have a lunch. It's not mandatory, but let's have a Zoom lunch. And so now it's almost, it's natural. Everyone just comes to lunch if they can, and we talk. And we usually don't talk work. We don't want to talk work. We talk about what's going on. We talk, games. We talk books. We talk movies. We talk, what's happening in the world. And it's good because it made me feel less alone. When I had that Zoom call, I knew I was going to have lunch coming up, and so I could talk to people. Slack also helps. I worked for another company, and just having Slack there and being able to communicate with people, it doesn't have to be Slack, but it felt like I had a team that I could lean on, or if I had a question, I could get to them. And so having that ability to easily contact somebody helped bring the team together. We've also done game nights. Modern Logic has a lot of people who love games, board games, video games, everything. So we've had game nights after work where we can get together, and we actually call it a happy hour. People can, bring a drink if they want and play a game. Once again, it's bringing people together, even though it's remote, is having that feeling. Another thing, the team created this one on our own, was they're starting to do one-on-ones by going for a walk. And so they're not doing Zoom. They have their phone and they have a headset on, but they're both out walking, talking about their one-on-one or talking about a project. So they're moving around, and because they used to do these coffee walks, and now they're still doing them, but just individual. And, as Dylan's saying, one-on-ones can be the same thing with peers. Sometimes you may just want to have your meeting not on Zoom, or maybe out in a different environment where you're just walking around and talking like you normally would. Treat it like that. So, Anders, I hope that answers your question. And part-time people, include them into it. Don't forget them. Don't forget them on emails. Don't forget them in communications. Don't forget them to invite them. And that's where with the part-time people is checking in on them again. It's like, how are you doing? So we have some remote developers, and on Slack, I'll just be like, hey, how are you doing? And usually they start talking about the project. I'm like, no. How are you doing? How are things going? And they're part-time, and they're just like, oh, wow, I didn't, things are going okay, or I'm having this problem or this. And it's just treat them the same way. And then making sure that especially if they're part-time, hey, did you know about this? Did you know about this change? Did you know about we're doing this, or there's been a change in the project, or hey, the client gave great feedback and things are going well. Giving them the rah-rah information on what's going on, because being part-time, sometimes you miss out on all that stuff. So got to make sure you include those people. So, Anders, I hope that helped you. John's question, do you feel that there are certain positions that tech startup teams hire too late? I would say the project manager, because usually it's the startup person. You're trying to save money, and you're like, okay, what do I really need? Once again, I'm using technical examples. Not all startups are technical, so I understand that. But let's just use my example from the beginning. It's an app. Okay, I'm a startup person. I have this great idea for an app. I'm not a coder. I need my money for a programmer. So I'm putting my money into that programmer, and then maybe I need another programmer and another programmer, or even just two. but I'm also getting pulled away because I need to talk to investors. I need to talk to people about, who can help me with my startup. And it's pulling your attention away from that project. So I would say it's that project manager. It's someone that's going to make sure that your project gets out. And that could be an individual that you can hire. It could be a company you can hire to help you with that. And then the other one I would say is QA, is testing your product, depending on what it could be. It could be user testing. If it's not an app, just getting it in front of people. Does this work? Do you think this could be a business? If it is technical, making sure that you can maybe have a test organization, and there's many out there that you can hire that can test your app and find the bugs. Find the bugs before you do a big public release. For an MVP, you can maybe keep that small, but if it's going to be going out, you only have one shot at making a first impression. And if you put your app out and it's full of bugs, especially on Android, because Android has so many different variations of phones, there's a lot of bugs that you can miss. So, John, that's one. Linda, is it important to have clients feel that they are part of the team? Can you talk to how you approach that? Yes. My mantra is one team. When I'm working on a project with anybody, it's a one team feel. It's not the client and us. It's our project. I want to get as much passion from everybody on our team and the client's team together, so we feel we're one. It's just one team working on this. We're all in this together for the startup, and that goes through communication again. Is communicating how are things going, sending out meeting notes after your client meeting, so everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what's going on once again, and responding to questions right away, responding in a positive way. And it's like, this is how to get a hold of me. We'll get those questions answered for you. We'll get it fixed as fast as we can. There's been a change, you don't throw up your hands. It's like, okay, there's a change. There's going to be changes. And you just roll with it. You just, treat it as one team. And if you have that clear communication going between you and your client and your customer, it's going to help the project because everyone's going to understand what's going on. It's going to help communication and team because people can talk very freely. When we have our calls with our clients, they're very open. They'll ask us anything. We can ask them anything. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And it makes people go, oh, I did not think about that. That's good. Do you have suggestions? And we'll give them suggestions. It's like, okay, what do you want to do here? Well, this is what I'm trying to do. And it's like, okay, we understand that. Can you give us some more examples? Because we really want to understand it. So you're not just, a client. Okay, we got to code this. No, it's all part of the team. One team is my feeling. The other thing is that mantra uses no surprises. And that's for you and for the client. Because if the client, if I surprise the client, hey, there's no build today, that's bad. You want to say, hey, every day it's like, the build may not come out on Thursday. These are the reasons why. We're trying to fix them. And so they're like, okay, I'm not surprised by it. They're working on it. They get it. And then it's like, we got it fixed. The build's out. Yay. So no surprises. And I asked the same thing from the client. No surprises to us. It's like, oh, we wanted analytics in this. Okay. That's going to take a little bit longer. So if you have that clear communication, that one team, you can work those things out. So Dylan, that's true inside a startup in general. Do you want everyone to communicate clearly and know where things are at? Good question. And it depends. I'm sorry, it depends. It's how I work. Yep, got it, Dylan. I try to be totally honest with everybody. I try to treat everyone like adults, and I try to give them the real information. So, great example, when my startup was on the rocks, I sat my people down and said, okay, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get more money. We'll have more money to this point. I will let you know if you need to start looking for a job. or, or I will give you this much, so you're not going to be left high and dry. And since I treated them like adults and told them everything, they stuck with me to the end. They stuck with me to the end. And so I was very proud of them. And, we were all sad when it ended, but we all gave it our best. And no one panicked and no one ran away. I think sometimes when you don't talk about things, people start to panic. And they may panic for the wrong reasons and leave. You may lose a good person because they may have heard a rumor, that, oh, we're in trouble. And if you communicate with those people, once again, in your one-on-ones with them, create an atmosphere where they can ask you those questions. Sometimes though, you can't say everything. It depends on what the situation is. I had another situation where a company was going to be bought, and they couldn't tell their employees that they were going to be bought because it's against the NDA. It could screw things up. So there's certain, you have to take it by a case basis, but on a general level, I try to be as honest as possible of people knowing what's going on. So then they know they can count on me and I can count on them. They know where it's going forward. So Dylan, I hope that answered your question. So any other questions? I could talk all day, but I know you have other classes to go to. And if you want to send an email, what is the best way to go back to the client and say you need more money due to projects being complicated? Okay. So working on a project and things as you, I'm trying to restate Ryan's project. Okay, let's say we're building an app again. And as we've gone through the app, things we know, oh, this is going to be a lot more complicated than we thought. This is why I suggest Agile again, because if you do an Agile process where, let's say you say, we're going to build these 3 features in these 2 weeks. We get those features in. If we're working on that and we notice this one is taking much longer, or up front, we can say, hey, this could take longer than we expected, that we're going to find out in this sprint. And if we do find out this is going to be more difficult, we may have to have a meeting and talk about this is more complicated. So either we have to change the way we're approaching it, or we may have to change the contract. And once again, it's early. It's early in the process. And if you keep communication going over and over again up front, this is how things are going, it's not going to be a surprise. And so I would put the blame on, let's say me, if I was a project manager that you hired, and I wait to the very last minute to say, hey, we're going to need more money. You're going to know pretty early on if things are on track, if not, especially if you're doing Agile and you're working through your sprints and you're finishing your sprints on time and the project is taking shape. But if you're a startup and you're working with a developer, some tips too, if you're not seeing anything from them, you need to check in on them to go, what's going on? This should have been done. You said it was going to be done on Friday. I didn't see it build. You got to stay on them. But so that's what I'd say is that open communication is doing it, do a sprint and you're like, wow, we found out it's going to be a lot more difficult to do this one feature you think, let's talk about it now. Also, I would say when you create a contract with an organization or the developer you're working with, to have that in, have those in clauses in there that says if this takes longer, we will renegotiate or we will talk. But you can always talk about, minimizing the feature or changing it, or cutting the feature to use that money to, maybe it's the big feature. Maybe you have 3 big features and that the second feature is going to take more time. Well, maybe you can't get that third one done in the time that you have. So once again, all goes back to communication. You're that town crier, it's 12 o'clock, all is well. And that's through your communication, it's through your one-on-one, it's through your meeting notes, it's through your status report with that team. and making sure that everyone's on track, and identify it early. Don't be a surprise and go, hey, I think I got to talk to you right now. We just finished the sprint and we think this is going to be more difficult. Let's have a meeting and talk about it. So I would bring it up early, bring it up often. So I hope that answers your question, right? Any other ones with 8 minutes left? Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you people. You know, I'm here in isolation like a lot of other people, so it's great to interact with other people. I hope you found some of this useful. As I said, if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email. I'll go back to that screen so you can see that quick. And then also, as I said, we have that promotion. John, do you want to slap that in the text in the chat again? So if you're looking for a promotion, we are doing one for Twin City Startup to help you out. Oops. There it is. Chip on that. So I thank you very much. I hope you have a great startup month. I know there's a lot of classes that I'm going to attend. There's more classes from people from Modern Logic that will be speaking this month. So thank you very much, and hopefully see you in real life sometime.